She didn't even realize she was crying until her knees hit the cold airport floor. The polished tiles reflected the blur of lights above her as she curled into herself, shaking, breath trembling like a child abandoned in the middle of a storm. Moments ago, she had been the untouchable CEO, the woman who commanded boardrooms, who walked with steel in her step, who never let anyone see her break. But now her white suit felt like thin paper, useless against the weight crushing her chest. People slowed their steps, some whispering, others pulling out their phones. Their lenses pointed at her like cold, black eyes feeding on her collapse. And all she could manage, with her arms wrapped around herself, was a choked whisper that slipped from her like a confession. "Please, don't hit me. I'm already hurt." If you believe every story hides a lesson, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales. Your support truly keeps these stories alive. The man who knelt beside her didn't hesitate. He wasn't dressed like a rescuer, gray sweater, worn shoes, backpack slung over one shoulder. Just another traveler passing through. But the moment he saw her fall, he crossed half the terminal in seconds. He didn't touch her at first, he simply lowered himself to her level, letting the noise of the airport fade around them. His eyes held something most people had forgotten how to offer: patience, and a quiet understanding that didn't demand explanations. She tried to hide her face, but her breath hitched painfully, and he saw the bruise under her jaw, subtle, fading, but unmistakable. A bruise you don't get from bumping into a door. She kept shaking, flashes of last night slamming into her like waves. Her ex-fiancé's voice. The way his anger had filled the room. The way she had frozen, again, too ashamed to scream. She had slipped out before dawn, booking the earliest flight she could find, desperate to get anywhere that wasn't there. Yet shame traveled fast, it arrived long before she did. She had spent a lifetime building herself into a woman no one could break, but now she felt like glass that had already shattered long before she hit the floor. People kept staring. Someone zoomed in their phone camera. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. For the first time in years, she whispered the truth to a stranger, not with words, but with the way her body folded, fragile and exhausted. She expected judgment. Or pity. Or worse, indifference. But the man only nodded slowly, as if he understood every unspoken word, and then gently shielded her with his presence, blocking the curious eyes around them. She swallowed hard, trying to gather herself. She didn't know why she had said, "Don't hit me." Maybe because the bruise still burned. Maybe because she no longer trusted anyone. Maybe because collapsing in front of strangers felt like another kind of vulnerability she wasn't ready for. She wiped her face, embarrassed, but the man's voice was calm and grounding, telling her she was safe. Something about the certainty in it made her look up at him fully for the first time. That's when she noticed, he wasn't just comforting her. He was watching the crowd too. Watching the cameras. Watching the way people consumed her fear the way they consumed everything, fast, careless, and without consequence. Then the man exhaled slowly, almost as if he'd been holding a truth inside for too long. He told her he understood fear, because he had lived through his own version of it. Not for himself, but for the little girl he raised alone. His daughter had once been caught in the middle of an incident he couldn't stop. One moment of violence from someone they trusted had left her terrified of loud voices, sudden movements, shadows on the wall. He had carried her out of that life, had rebuilt everything from scratch, had become both mother and father, healer and protector. He wasn't just a traveler. He wasn't just a helpful stranger. He was the man who had spent 4 years fighting to keep his daughter safe from the same kind of hurt she was running from. She stared at him, stunned, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Not with heroism. Not with pride. But with the quiet, tired honesty of someone who had no reason to pretend. Someone who recognized pain the way a soldier recognizes the sound of gunfire. Around them, the airport kept moving, announcements echoing, suitcases rolling, strangers hurrying toward places where life still felt normal. But inside that small circle of stillness, the world slowed. She felt real human warmth reaching her for the first time in months. Not pity. Not condescension. Just a man who had nothing to gain by helping her, but chose to anyway. He told her that running doesn't make you weak. Surviving doesn't make you broken. And being hurt doesn't make you unworthy of gentleness. His daughter had taught him that. Watching her relearn safety, relearn trust, relearn the simple joy of breathing freely, he had learned that people don't heal through force or lectures. They heal by being allowed to exist without fear. The bruise on her jaw throbbed. But something in her chest loosened. For the first time since last night, she breathed without shaking. The weight on her shoulders didn't vanish, but it shifted, like she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. And then, almost unexpectedly, her voice cracked as she whispered something she hadn't admitted even to herself. She wasn't scared of the men who hit her anymore. She was scared of what she had become, trying to hide it. The stranger didn't react with shock. He simply nodded again, as if acknowledging the courage it took to speak that truth out loud. Before she stood up, the man asked her if she wanted to call someone she trusted. She hesitated. She had no one. And somehow, he understood that too. He didn't offer solutions. He offered presence. He stayed until her breath steadied, until the phones lowered, until the world stopped feeling like a threat. And when she finally rose to her feet, she felt different, not strong, not healed, but possible. Like she might make it through the day after all. As she walked toward her gate, she paused and looked back at him, this single father who had stepped into her darkest moment without even asking her name. It struck her then that the world was filled with people who could hurt you, and people who would kneel beside you on a cold floor, asking nothing but offering everything they could. If this story made you feel even a small shift in your heart, please like, comment, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Your engagement helps more stories like this reach those who are struggling quietly. Before you go, tell us in the comments. What part of the story stayed with you the longest?